You usually have somebody in charge.
Right.
Well, there wasn't anybody in charge, and the kids were putting their pool cues through the acoustical tile ceilings and making a lot of mess and damage, and after a while they were kicked out. So after that, they moved town meetings and all town official stuff out of this building over to the Dickerman building. The Dickerman building was not built to be the town hall. The Dickerman building was built to be a place for children. It hasn't been for years and years and years. But anyway, when the Dickerman building was built, they took this table over there, and that was in the building up until quite recently. In fact, when we first moved here and my husband got elected to be on the town council, that was the table that they met around. Since then, the place has been updated, and they made a place up at the back with chairs and
A podium.
podium where everybody meets when they have a meeting. But back then, the town used to meet, the town council used to sit around this table.
Well, I'll be.
We've got
It
various.
was built in 1903, as you can see. So it's been around for a while. But when they stopped using it over there, I guess somebody suggested they throw it out, but somebody else with calmer heads prevailed and they brought it over here. So we've had it ever since, which hasn't been a heck of a long time. But.
Right.
We have various other displays all around. Who was the gentleman that did all these pictures for us? You told me one time.
Mr. McCaj. Mr. McCaj was an artist, and he, I'm not sure it was him or his wife.
I don't know, but
I don't know really where the pictures came from. I wasn't the one that got them. I knew the McCages, there were Laura and her husband, but I don't remember which one was an artist. I do know that the pictures were all given to me. I was in charge of the town's centennial back in 1979, I think. And when I went around and I talked to people who had been here a long time, and I was able to get a lot of pictures donated to me, and these are among the pictures. The people over in Melrose had just had their centennial, and I had gotten to meet Mr. and Mrs., oh, I can't remember the names, but they offered to help me, and they did. And we, between the two of us, we were able to get lots of pictures and lots of cool stuff. So, thank goodness I had met them, because I don't. I guess
we
I have all
also
the stuff
lucked
that
out in getting. Well, we've been donated some things.
We've been donated just about everything in here.
A gentleman who lives here in Interlachen just donated some of this stuff for us. We haven't got his plaque. The rifle and the gun. And then, of course, the river flows north. That was done by a committee. That is for all of history of Putnam County. But we're working on, displaying some new stuff.
We
makes
think
it
that
nice.
everything is interesting, but most of the people that come in here are mildly interested in everything, but they're mostly interested in something that has something to do with them or their families. So
And we lucked out with the Hastings Feed Company. We got a whole bunch of that, but the only trouble is when the Hastings came through Interlachen, they went to the town hall and had all this memorabilia. Unfortunately,
they went to the town hall, and the lady at the town hall said, "Oh, we don't want any of that junk." So they took it all down to the Florida Historical Museum. And so my husband and I went down to the Florida Museum and bought the stuff and brought it back here. So anyway, we're really lucky that we've got as much as we have, because a lot of people think of history as old junk that you need to clear out so you can get the new stuff. And us old people that like history say, "Oh, don't do that." For instance, this was going to go to the dump. This came from the brush store. Obviously, it's where they kept the mail in the brush store. Nobody in the world has any use for that. But to throw it away seems a little awful to me.
Oh, I'm
so
glad
we
it
said,
didn't get thrown
we'll
away.
take it. And so it's there. Our president at the time thought that was the stupidest thing they ever heard and wanted to get rid of it, but
we lucked out, and now we have
now we
that.
still
we
have
have
it.
a bunch
In fact,
of
our
things.
current president was saying the same thing, but If you don't understand or don't know about history and don't know where something came from, it's hard to really appreciate it.
It is.
But some people like antiques just because they're old and pretty. But if you give somebody something that's old and not so pretty, they're going to say, this is a piece of junk, I'm going to throw it away. Or I'll put it in the drawer because it means something to you, but it doesn't mean anything to me. But we're a depository of all those things that mean something to somebody.
I know. Even a Geiger counter. Somebody, we got donated a Geiger counter. I mean, you have everything and anything, especially if it's something to do with Interlachen or West Putnam is what we're trying to find.
And it may not have anything to do with Interlachen per se, but it has something to do with somebody that lived in Interlachen, and that's what history is all about.
That is very cool.
We can't very well say it had to have been made in Interlachen or it had to have been here ever since the start, because if that was the case, we'd have a few old houses and nothing else. But because we have things that we think will interest people who come in here, that we think are interesting because they have something to do with Interlachen, we've got all kinds of stuff.
Very cool.
For instance, there are people who say, why would you keep that flag? It has nothing to do with Interlachen. Well, one of the men that was in the service and who lived in Interlachen actually knew General Pershing. And that flag was flown over General Pershing's headquarters. I'm not sure he knew General Pershing, but he knew somebody that could give him this flag. So he got the flag, and it has been hanging in this building ever since it turned into the town hall. And when they moved the town hall and built the new building and hung this over there, some of the newer members looked at that and said, what do we need that old junky thing on the wall for? And they brought it over here and put it in here because they didn't want it over there anymore because it meant nothing to them. And we said, of course we'll have it. It's fantastic that we've got that. That flew over Pershing's headquarters. Who's Pershing? Why would we want that over at our place? We don't know anything about Pershing. You know, it's different folks. For what you think about history is your opinion. But you probably aren't going to go to a historical society's museum if you couldn't care less about history. And if you're really here because you've been forced to come here, you might say something like, well, what do you want that for? But if you are somebody that cares about history, you think, wow, that's really cool. So somebody in our town actually knew Pershing or actually knew somebody that knew Pershing? How did we get something like that? Well, we didn't get it because they knew Pershing. We got it because the person that had donated it to this building knew Pershing. But we also have it because whoever had it last didn't want it, and we took it, and we know the history. So that's what the story is behind almost everything in this building. Like I said, the old Indian canoe up on the wall was found by somebody here in town.
That is really neat.
If they had thrown it away, it would probably be the last Indian canoe that ever was in Interlachen. But because the Historical Society has it, it's here.
That is cool.
Did you close my
Fortunately, we have a historical society. Fortunately, we have the building. Fortunately, we had a wall that we could put it up on. My son and his friends and my husband came over and put it up. There has to be a little bit of interest or things don't get saved. And that's why we've got a history that's in a history museum. I mean, everybody has a history, and everybody doesn't necessarily save it. People save their photograph albums because they want to see a picture of their great-grandmother or whatever. I wasn't fortunate to have any great-grandparents. I didn't even have any grandparents. Except for one grandfather, all my grandparents had died before I was born. So I treasure the one or two pictures that I've been able to
Absolutely.
But different strokes for different folks. But anyway, since I like history, I was sitting right there in that corner where there used to be a stove that looked just like that, talking to a gentleman named Mr. Stock back many years ago. And he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 39. And he said, oh, I'm so glad to meet you and know that you're interested in history. I'm 80, and I won't be here very long, but I was born here. And he said it was the early 1880s, and there aren't very many of us left. And I don't know, very many of them know much about history because my parents and my grandparents started the town. And I really want to make sure it gets passed on. So he said, I want to get a book written, I want to do all these things, and I want to start a museum. So thanks to Mr. Stock and his forth-thinking, I guess you'd call it, this is all here. If it weren't for
Very
Mr.
cool.
Stock, I don't think it would be.
Mr. Stock?
Beg your pardon?
Mr. Stock?
Mr. Stock, S-T-O-C-K.
Very cool.
And his first name was Joseph.
Joseph
He was
Stock.
Joseph Stock. And his parents and grandparents started Interlachen. They
Very
came
cool.
here from England, and they liked it here, so they started a town.
That is,
And he was
I never
born
knew that.
here. It wasn't even Interlachen when he was born. He was born in this area.
Right.
But anyway, when he died, he was in his 80s, and by that time we had had a historical society going for a few years.
Well, that is very
And
cool.
we can really thank Mr.
I
Stock for
I
that.
didn't have any knowledge of that. So, I want to thank you ladies for your time.
You're welcome.
And this has been a great tour, and
Well, you're welcome to stay longer.
Well,
I can talk all day.
We're
unfortunately,
open on every Saturday from 10 to 2.
And if nobody's here, which sometimes happens, there are phone numbers on the front, and the first one I believe is mine, and if I'm home, I'll come right down. I just live right down here.
Very
In fact,
cool.
the house we bought, when we bought it, we loved it because it was an old house and it was big. And my husband and I took in foster children, so we wanted a big house. And when I saw the ad in the paper, it said, this 5-bedroom house in the country is between 2 lakes and within walking distance to schools and stores. And I called up and said, what's the matter with that house? And she said,
Nothing.
it's 25 miles from here.
Yeah.
We lived in Gainesville at the time. My husband was going to college. Anyway, I said, oh, my husband doesn't mind driving that far, and we're looking for a house, so we'll go look at it.
Yeah.
Well, when we came out and saw the house, it was love at first sight, and we bought the house. We found out that the lady that lived there had fallen down the stairs, and she was getting older, and it was scary to her to live in a 2-story house, so she wanted to buy a 1-story house. So she sold the house to us. And when I started finding out about the history, I was absolutely thrilled because it turned out it was the first house built in town. The other house was built by the other man that started Interlachen, Mr. Hastings. Mr. Holford and Mr. Hastings started Interlachen. And Mr. Hastings built his house across the street from Mr. Holford. But unfortunately, 3 or 4 years ago, the Hastings house burned down. But Mr. Holford's house is still there, thank goodness.
We're lucky to have.
Nothing ever happens to it because that would mean my house was gone.
Yeah.
But anyway, people have said to us, you want to live in an old house? Yeah, but we did put in bathrooms and plumbing and that sort of thing.
We're lucky to have Mary Lou as being a charter member of the Historical Society.
very lucky.
And she's one of the last of them. And we meet, the Historical Society of Interlachen meets on the 4th Monday of the month at 4 o'clock here in this building.
Okay.
So we welcome anybody who would like to come and visit.
And what is this road out here?
The
Atlantic.
road right in front?
Yeah,
Atlantic.
Well, there's,
Atlantic.
Yeah. Atlantic.
okay. So,
come down Atlantic to get here.
okay, so
Off of 20.
anyone in Interlachen wants to come to the Historical Society meeting, it's right off of Atlantic,
It's on Atlantic.
or on
But even
Atlantic.
if they don't want to be at meetings, we're open every Saturday.
Right. Saturday, 10
We
to,
hope.
10 to 1?
Sometimes
10
we
to
don't
2.
have anybody that wants to come down here, but if one of our members is able, and that's what they're supposed to do, there's
Yeah,
somebody
well,
here.
I'm here on the first Saturdays because
Okay.
I volunteered and I don't
It's
know a
fun.
whole bunch about it, but I love the history of
yeah, I do
Interlachen.
too.
I love old things, and I'm a bit of a pack rat myself.
Yeah.
Well,
Huh?
I have been coming here, like I said, ever since the 1980s,
Very
which
well.
is a long time ago. But I can remember Mr. Stock saying, oh, I'm so glad to meet you because I'm 80 and I won't be around much longer.
right,
Well,
that's
I'm
cool.
80 now and I won't be around much longer. So I am thrilled when young people come in, as long as they say, this is interesting, I
It
want
is.
to hear some more, and I want to come back.
We'll
A lot of-
definitely come back.
Yeah. And we are trying to put new stuff out and rearrange things and make it so that it's not the same year after year. So we're working on things.
Well,
And if
the
you
only
want
way
to
you can
donate or
actually
come
make it
help.
different is by adding things that people give us.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We don't go out and buy things.
just don't have
And
room.
history doesn't change. It stays the same. But it gets, everything that happens this year is going to be history next year.
Yep.
So if something cool happens now, we hope that somebody will give us a donation of whatever it was that was cool. We're not going to put post office
Right.
maps or something like that. But we
I think
have.
we've learned a lot from him.
We have things from, like the Indian canoe, that was donated to us, we found that in the,
Right.
but anyway, it could have gone to the dump, but
Yeah,
isn't
that
it
would have been
nice?
horrible.
It didn't go to the dump, actually, it was at the middle.
Makes you wonder how many things have gone to the dump, so,
Oh, yeah, most everything
yeah.
historic, well, God forbid if we were given everything.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
We would have to have a much bigger museum.
Much
but
bigger.
the things that we've got are charming, interesting. They might be pretty, but they don't have to be pretty to be in a museum. This isn't an art museum, this is a history museum.
Right.
So we're thrilled to pieces when we get anything. And when they tell us what the history is, it makes it that much more interesting. Otherwise, we have to figure out what the history is. Like that boat. We know that it was an Indian canoe, and we know where it was.
Right.
But we don't know anything about it because those people died a long time ago. But nevertheless, it's very interesting, and it's kind of interesting to see how much of it was left. You know it had to have been more than that.
Right.
Or it would have not floated, but.
Not very
it's
well.
really cool. And when kids come in and think that that could have been a boat, it makes them think about history and how
right.
cool something like that would be. It's just like this flag.
Yeah.
It flew over General Pershing's
Where
headquarters.
you talked to him.
And most people have never heard of General Pershing, unless they're old like me.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I never heard of him, so.
And
Yeah.
just the fact that our Historical Society president was in the military many, many years ago and actually knew General Pershing makes me thrilled to pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I didn't know General Pershing either, but I knew the name.
Yeah.
I'd heard the name, and I probably saw him on television when they first invented television.
Yeah.
Actually, this may be an interesting fact. My ancestor developed television. Philo T. Farnsworth is the man that made televisions.
no
And
kidding.
his child was Farnsworth, and one of the Farnsworths, somewhere along the line, they kidnapped the little boy and took him up to Canada, and he was rescued by people who didn't speak English. They couldn't pronounce his last name, and he ended up with the last name Faneuf. And so my last name is Faneuf, and it's a lot more story than you ever want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm about to run out of battery too, so I'm down to less than a bar, so.
Oh,
I do want to thank you for your time. This has
You're
been
welcome.
awesome.
Well, it was very nice meeting you.
And
I hope you
it's
can
nice to
use
meet you.
something.
And let me go ahead and shut this off.